And that's how Beshear's going to win. Because you don't know how to message out beyond your base. And you think messaging out beyond your base means, well, I gotta be as moderate and liberal as possible in order to grab swing voters. Not realizing that your real problem, the problem we saw Bevin even, is that the conservative vote and the conservative independents, if you don't show them that you are going to be different, that you are a conservative, they will not show up to vote. Well, everybody. Welcome to another amazing episode of the Andrew Cooperrider Show. Of course, I'm your host, Andrew Cooperrider, and we've got some amazing topics for you guys today. First, we're going to cover how the Western Kentucky Relief Fund, that nonprofit account that our state government somehow set up, how Beshear's mismanaged it, and that led to around 200 people as of right now that we know for a fact receiving checks for $1,000 each out of this account that were never even bothered by the tornado, including people that live in northern Kentucky. Additionally, as well, we see independents and other, outside of Democrat and Republican, independents and other party voting registration is the fastest growing registration block in Kentucky. What does this mean to elections going forward? Where are they coming from? Why are they there? How are we to message to them? And what that means. Finally, as well, we're going to cover a story about how a lieutenant governor candidate for here in Kentucky's Facebook account was hacked, and then explicit child images were then displayed on said account for over 24 hours before Facebook took it down. Why does Facebook find it so easy to moderate right-wing content, but has a hard time handling this left-wing content? We'll go into it. I'm sorry. I just called child pornography left-wing content. Freudian slip. My apologies. I mean, why do they have such an easy time taking care of right-wing content, but such a hard time dealing with child pornography? Anyways, welcome to today's show. Once again, please like, comment, subscribe, share it out there. Visit the website for the Treasures Race. That's Andrew, the number 4, KY.com. Once again, that's Andrew, the number 4, KY.com. This podcast existed well before I was running for state treasurer, so I don't try to concentrate on that too much. One of these days we'll do an episode specifically about the Treasures Race. But until then, please go on there, like, subscribe, comment, donate, help out, and let's dig into today's topics. So to start off with, we have these funds that Beshear has set up. Basically, his way of deciding to help out Eastern and Western Kentucky is to set up a account for you, the private citizens and individuals, to donate money into, because apparently he doesn't understand that government probably shouldn't be doing literal charity work. This isn't even me saying like that's benevolent work. What he did was set up charity accounts, because apparently there wasn't enough private nonprofits and churches and everything else that were dealing with this that you could donate money to if you wanted to help out the area. Apparently we needed to get government involved. And understand this. This is point and reason why government should never do charity work. Never do it. First off, it's the cost of everything. When you're dealing with private nonprofits, you can have things like volunteers. You can have things like the transparency side of things doesn't have to be as straightforward. It doesn't have as much of an administrative body having to watch over it, and so on and so forth. Because quite frankly, we trust when we give our money to nonprofits that they are, one, not making a profit, and two, doing the proper work that they need to be doing for it. And there is some people out there that watch charities and grade them, and so that kind of gives you some ideas too as well, whether or not they're doing a good job. But when government sets up a charity, you have the administrative costs. I'll give you a perfect example, and that'd be the food stamps program. I think everybody would agree that food stamps, SNAP benefits, not everybody, but a lot of people would agree food stamps and SNAP benefits, while needing some tweaks, is generally a quote-unquote entitlement, a welfare program that not all of us have a huge problem with, in the premise of saying, look, if people need food, we should get them food, right? So I don't think anybody has any debate about maybe a debate about whether or not government should be doing that, sure. But a debate about whether or not this is worthy work. That is an important, worthy thing to be doing. Make sure everybody is fed. But the problem becomes when we look at those programs and we look at the administrative fees of offering those programs, what we see is that private nonprofits are frankly just better at it. So when we look at the food stamps program, the average administrative cost of that is about 18%. But when we look at private nonprofit food banks and food security groups, what we see is their administrative costs range from as low as 0.8%, and generally the good ones will go as high as 1.5%. So we're seeing a less than 2% administrative cost versus 17, 18% when the government's taking care of it. Guys, that's a 15 to 16% more of dollars that are being put into that program, ending up in the people to help out the people. That means one, you're able to help more people, and two, it just costs less to do the same work. But for some reason, Beshear saw fit to set up these accounts. And then for some other inexplicable reason, to me, people donated to these accounts. I'm saying inexplicable for this reason. Now, don't get Western Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky. Listen, I helped with the relief efforts. We did food drives, fundraisers for it. We donated money to certain nonprofits. We ran supplies out there too as well. We did all those things too as well. I'm not saying it's inexplicable to me why you'd want to help out in those situations. Of course we would. We did. I hope you did too as well. But what's inexplicable to me is who trusts the government with more of their money? That's the part to me I never understood. And if you're somebody listening and you donate to those funds, God bless you. I'm not trying to put you down. I'm just wondering if you thought it through all the way, because maybe you thought you didn't realize this was a fund that was completely under the control of Beshear. But generally speaking, you probably shouldn't be donating money to the government to handle. Okay, just period. You shouldn't do it. Donate it to a nonprofit, because this is what happens. First off, there is no checks and balances put into place, because the way government's supposed to work is that Beshear can't spend money without it getting authorized through appropriations, through the budget, and so on and so forth. But in this case, the legislature didn't appropriate this money. Beshear just set up these accounts. And oh, by the way, these accounts have brought in around $40 million or so, give or take. There could be a lot more, including receiving money like $100,000 from, I guess, Taiwan donated to the program, $100,000 there. And so anyways, he sets up these programs, but they're not normally appropriated funds for the legislature. So the legislature has no control over it. And there was no control over these accounts. And so Beshear sent a list to the state treasurer and asked, hey, issue these checks. Here's your list of people to issue $1,000 checks to. And so they send out these checks. And then they start getting calls from people saying, hey, I received this check for $1,000, but I didn't actually get damaged by the tornado, including some people that lived in northern Kentucky, and they're receiving this. And that now creates a problem, because so far to date, we've had about 200 people call in and say, hey, look, I didn't get damaged by the tornado. I received this $1,000 check, and I didn't get any damage. Guys, that's $200,000. So far, $200,000, okay? They only sent out around 2.5 million, I believe, out of the account. So $200,000, around 10% of it, so far has been canceled because it went to the wrong people. And when asked the question of, well, how'd you come up with this list? Beshear said, well, I got it from FEMA. But then when FEMA was asked, well, how did you give them a list? FEMA was like, I don't know what you're talking about. We didn't give them any list. These people aren't on the list. I don't understand why he sent them checks. So who's right, who's wrong? And who's double checking? You know, who's double checking? As state treasurer, I know I certainly would be calling this out. I know Allison, the current state treasurer, she's been calling it out too as well. But even on the preemptive side of things, of saying, look, can you show me any documentation at all for why they're receiving these checks, what damages they have gotten? What claims did they make? Because that would certainly be, I think, a good question, because that's what you do when you're stewarding other people's money. But that's not how Democrats think. That's not how Beshear thinks. He sent out this money, and I guess the letter he sent with it was, I'm Beshear, I'm giving you guys lots of help. It was essentially vote buying, is what a lot of people said. He was trying to create a good headline for himself. He's trying to vote by saying, look at me, look what I'm doing for you, and to see how that turned out. Well, what we're seeing quite clearly is that he's shooting off these checks willy-nilly, not paying attention to what he's doing. So what can we learn from this? One, this should be completely outlawed. And this takes a little bit of chutzpah from the legislature to step in and outlaw these types of things. Say, no governor can create a private nonprofit accounts that people can put money into to help individuals. It all has to go through the legislature. That should be what they do. And then they can say, and then if there's an emergency and we want to create these accounts, well, then Beshear can call us into an emergency session and we can create the accounts. But it is not okay for the governor to set up an appropriation scheme or an appropriations end around. That's not okay. That's what they should do. But however, the reason why I would say that would take a little bit of chutzpah is because you're going to have the headlines. You're going to have the headlines that say, Republican legislators want to outlaw Western Kentucky, Eastern Kentucky funds. And because we know that media is slant and they're going to try to make it look bad. They're going to try to make them look real bad when they're not. They could come in and say, well, look, we're not even outlawing it. We're just saying it needs to be set up by us. So that way this whole fraud situation, this whole waste and abuse, and we're stewarding other people's money properly and correctly. But see, this is what happens. And this tells you something too. This tells you everything you need to know about government. This is how they spend money. This is how Beshear spends money when it's literally donated to him. No checks, no balances, no cares in the world. Send whatever you want out. What do they do when it's your money? What do they do when it's my money? What do they do when it's our tax dollars that have been forcefully taken from us? If they don't even treat dollars we're giving to them by I didn't donate to these funds, but if they're not even treating the dollars that are being given to them willingly with care to honor the reason why people put it in, how are they treating the types of dollars when they're being taken by force from us? No care at all in the world. I don't think we need to guess at that. We know that Beshear does not care. He absolutely does not care. Next, we have this post from Secretary of State Michael Adams, where he says candidates for statewide office should take notice. To win a general election, they must reach out beyond their base and court the fastest growing block of the electorate. As far as, and he said that in a post as he shares out other party registration breaks double digits. So that would be things like independent or third party registrations are growing significantly in Kentucky, growing faster than even Republican registration is. And of course, Democrat registration is dropping. So, no surprise there. And so, but Michael Adams makes a statement there. And that's a statement I hear a lot of people talking about is, hey, we've got to make sure we pull in these independents. And I agree, we do. But where are these independents actually coming from? And that leads me to go into this debate that we're seeing play out. So for an example, when we are looking at these independents, there's a common belief to say, well, they're middle of the road. They're neither Republican nor Democrat. And so therefore they need good, moderate messaging is how you bring in the independents. But they're ignoring a fact, or maybe they're not ignoring it. Maybe they're purposely forgetting it, but a very important fact. And that is that people leave their parties all the time because they're disgusted with their behavior. Not because they're not moderate enough, but because they're not either conservative or liberal enough for the people on the left. People leave their party all the time because they feel like you're talking out of one side of your mouth while you're going off and doing other things. They get disgusted with what they see going on, period. And I would posit that this growing group of independents in Kentucky are mainly made up of, one, right-leaning people who are conservatives, not Republicans. But they are conservative. And I'm going to give you a couple pieces of information that lead me to make this conclusion, to support my argument. Okay, so the first thing is I'm going to show you, let's take a look at this graph. And so for those of you not watching this, or for those of you watching this at home, or I'm sorry, listening to this, you can't see what I'm showing you. But what I'm showing is a graph from Gallup showing whether or not people lean to the left or to the right when they're independents. Okay, so this is, so they surveyed independents and they said, do you lean Republican or do you lean Democrat? Okay. Now, this ranges from January 2021 to November, December 2022. Okay. So this is over the course of about a little over a year. How has things progressed? And what we see is a steady decline in Democrat leaners that are independents, and a steady increase in Republican leaners that are independents. So when they first started polling in January 4th through 15, 2021, they saw 37% of independents were leaning Republican and 51% Democrat. But when they took their most recent poll, it said 47%, a whole 10 percentage points growth, were leaning Republican versus 42% leaning Democrat. That's a almost 10% decrease on the Democrat side of things. 10% almost exactly flop. And what happened? You can't blame Trump. You can't do it. Because Trump, at this point, when this poll was started, had been out of office for, this is just as Trump left office, okay? So as you're seeing people progress into it, and over time, we're going farther and farther away from Trump. So I don't think you can make the conclusion that Trump has anything to do with this. So one of two things could be happening. Either one, what's happening is Democrats are behaving in such a non-moderate way that's pushing Democrat-leaning independents farther to the right. Or two, Democrat-leaning independents are registering Democrat, and Republicans and people are leaving the Republican Party and registering as independents. Those are the two options we have here. And I posit it's the second. And here's my evidence, okay? So first I showed you a graph to prove that independents are registered independents are leaning Republican, not Democrat. And now I'm going to follow up with my posit that it is because they are upset with the Republican Party that they're leaving. Let's look at poll results. What we see across the nation is when we see Republicans, either one trying to be moderate in the general, or we see Republicans that are lackluster. And I'm talking about people like Mehmet Oz in Pennsylvania. He was pretty liberal. He'd been liberal most of his life. He was not exactly viewed as the most conservative person in the world. Or when I look at some of these others, and then I look at who won, and who won big, I do not see middle-of-the-road Republicans. I see strong and articulate Republicans winning. Let's take a look in Florida, the Ron DeSantis election. Would anybody in their right mind say that Ron DeSantis is a middle-of-the-road, moderate politician? Not in any traditional sense. I believe he's moderate in the sense that I believe my views are moderate and normal because I have a common sense. But to the political spectrum people, the callers, they would not say that Ron DeSantis is moderate. I don't even think Republicans would say he's quote unquote moderate. And so what did he win by? He won big, huge, combating on issues that Republicans are typically afraid to even talk about. And he wins big. So it leads me to a conclusion that, and then we also look too at Kentucky and how Republicans are winning in the generals and things like that. And that leads me to state that are people leaving the Republican Party because they are upset. This growing group of independents, are they coming from the Republicans? Not as much the Democrats. And the reason why I say that is because a lot of rural areas too, when you go out and you talk to these registered Democrats that vote Republican, because you have a lot of that in rural Kentucky, and you bother to talk to them, what you find out is the only reason why they are registered Democrat is so they could vote in the primaries, because for so long there locally, the elections were held in the primaries and they had primary candidates and they didn't have primaries on the Republican side, so they were registered Democrat, so they continue to vote in the Democrat primaries. With that thought process in mind, those rural Democrats, as they're switching, are not going to stop off in independent land. They're going to go over to Republican because they're worried about being able to vote in primaries. That's their logic. And if you talk to them, you'd know that. And so I don't think they're stopping off in independent land. I think there are a sect of people. This is what I think is going on. There are some independents who are truly independent moderate. I'm not saying there isn't. But I believe that the majority of independents in Kentucky are conservative. I know a lot of them. All the independents I know are more conservative than almost any Republican I know. So I posit that they are conservative. And Adams is right. You got to reach out beyond your base if you're going to win. And the question to the Republicans are, do you recognize that your base isn't just moderates? Do you recognize that your base is the moderates? Your base is not the conservatives. That's what I think a lot of Republicans don't get. Conservatives, not Republicans, but conservatives are a little bit flaky in this way. I don't mean flaky in traditional way. I just like flaky. I'm saying flaky in the way of they do not owe you anything. All the conservatives I know, and I'm a conservative, not just a Republican, I'm a conservative. All the conservatives I know do not believe they owe you a vote just because there's an R next to your name. They do not believe that. I'm not going to say they're going to vote for Democrats. A lot of them won't, but they just simply will not vote in an election if they don't like the choices. They just won't cast a ballot. They don't play, because that's why they're independent. That's why they're independent conservatives. Because they don't play the two-party game. They see it for what it is sometimes. I'm a Republican because I agree with the platform. I'm a Republican because I believe that the Republican voters and myself agree. But I recognize what they're saying when they look at the parties, and they say, especially a lot of the leadership of the parties, and they say, wow, what do you stand for? It certainly isn't anything conservative, and it barely is your platform if it is at all. I bet you, I almost guarantee you a lot of GOP leadership don't even know what their platform says. And I guarantee it, and I guarantee they don't read it and they don't understand it because of the simple fact that they continually violate it. I mean, that's the only way you see some of these crazy people running as Republicans. How do you have somebody running as a Republican that gets any attention at all, that's running as a Republican, that founded a Black Lives Matter inspired organization, Anti-Racism KY, that lobbied openly for years to require implicit bias training for all government employees, all teachers, that tears down historical statues, that literally 2 weeks before declaring holds a diversity, equity, and inclusion summit. A person that has to delete their entire social media before declaring because they're so far to the left. And they all know it. They don't care. How do you explain that other than the fact that the principals have left the building a long time ago? And I'm telling you right now, these independents, these people you need to capture. And this is why Beshear is going to be hard to be beat. It's not because Beshear's particularly popular. It is because the Republican candidate for governor has got to make a case on why they will concrete and actually be different to the independents. And I'm afraid that this messaging of, well, the independents are moderates and you need to be a very moderate messaging will continue to lead us down the wrong path where we miss out on who the real independents are, which are the conservatives. And you need not just to message conservative, you need to be conservative to capture them. That's what I think. I could be wrong, but I think the data, as I've showed to you, coupled with election results we've seen in 2022 across this nation, I think it bears that out. I think it bears out the fact that it is quite clear that independents are conservative. The majority of them are conservative, especially in red states like Kentucky. I think they're just disgusted with the lack of activity, with the gamesmanship, the political games that they see the parties playing. I think that's what they're upset about. And I think they've got good reason to be. And I don't think how you reach out to them is by being as moderate as possible. In fact, that's how you lose them. And that's how Beshear is going to win. Because you don't know how to message out beyond your base. And you think messaging out beyond your base means, well, I gotta be as moderate and liberal as possible in order to grab swing voters. Not realizing that your real problem, the problem we saw Bevin even having, is that the conservative vote and the conservative independents, if you don't show them that you are going to be different, that you are a conservative, they will not show up to vote for you. They won't do it. You've got to show it to them. And for our final story, we have this here. Lieutenant Governor candidate Wesley Dieter's Facebook account was hacked. Or she says it was hacked, and I believe her. We'll cover that in a second. Was hacked. Then proceeded to post inappropriate, explicit material of children. And this isn't sort of kind of explain. This was full on naked 10-year-olds. I'm not kidding. It was disgusting. It was gouge your eyes out gross. And I'm saying this as saying it was blah, 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 because I read about this 13 hours after it started. And I said, well, is her account still up? Did they pull it down? I'm friends with Wesley Dieter's on Facebook. I clicked onto it. I was there for 2 seconds before I exited out. It was still up 13 hours later. Turns out Facebook left up this explicit material for over 24 hours. Guys, just think about that. If you say the wrong word in a post, if you post something that doesn't go with the current political narrative, you'll be fact-checked, you'll get shadow banned, you'll get knocked down, you'll get marked for it. You'll receive a ban. I moderate a Facebook group. I have seen people say things like, well, that's just robbing Peter to pay Paul, and then receive a 3-day ban for it because they're pushing out crime, robbing Peter to pay Paul. That's saying. I've seen people get bans for that. I have seen crazy things happen in the groups I moderate, and happen under 24 hours of basic, simple comments getting hit by Facebook. I've seen, I mean, the Hunter Biden laptop story, you post that, they could take care of that right away. But for some reason, this woman's account gets hacked. Now, Wesley Dieter, she's a lieutenant governor candidate with Eric Dieter's. They are not blood related. I do believe, if I'm not mistaken, I do believe she is like married to Eric's like second cousin. Eric Dieter's is like second cousin. I think she's married to or something. So they're not related. But I think her husband is like somehow cousins or something with Eric Dieter. So Eric Dieter's lieutenant governor running mate, Wesley Dieter's account's hacked. Now, there was some people out there claiming or kind of hinting around it. Well, was she really hacked? Was she not? I believe she's hacked for the simple reason. This became some major news. This was reported to the FBI even. She says she reported it to the FBI. I'm inclined to believe her. Because this became major news and it was still up. Like, if you accidentally posted that or whatever, you wouldn't leave it up. You would, the minute it starts catching whatever, you would take it down right away. So it's up there. Full on. Awful stuff. FBI's alerted. They can't get it down. But it takes longer than 24 hours. I'm just flabbergasted by this. And I'm flabbergasted because of how hard they go after right-wing content and how hard they go after things that Republicans put out and how hard they do those things. How easy it is for them to fact check, how easy it is for them to shadow ban, how easy it is for them to do all this when it revolves political content. But when it's actual, illegal, explicit children being exploited, they can't get it done. That's ridiculous to me. And it tells you where their priorities are. We live in a world where our social media elite tech people believe that a conservative viewpoint is more dangerous than child explicit materials. I'm not even saying the words child and then the P word after, because I don't know if they ban that word or not or what the deal is. And I'm trying to get the message out there, not trying to receive bans and stuff from Facebook or shadow bans. So I'm saying child explicit material just for that reason. But maybe I shouldn't worry about it because after all, they can't even take it down after 24 hours. It's ridiculous. I am blown away by the amount of rank partisanship at Facebook, and it just goes to show. And we're seeing this grow more and more in tech. We're seeing this happen with AI more and more. We're seeing these issues continue. And we've got to step in and deal with it. And we as a state got to step in and deal with it too. They are violating our own election laws. They are affecting the outcome of elections by picking and choosing favorites. They enjoy the protections of being a platform, much like a utility company, phone company would or anything else, but with none of the responsibility that comes with news and other media places that get to pick and choose what gets pushed out. If they want to pick and choose what gets pushed out, they should be treated just like newspapers and magazines, which means they can get sued for content that is libelous on their sites, which they couldn't handle and they couldn't survive that. Well, guys, that's what we have time for today. Thank you so much for joining us. I appreciate it. And please like, comment, share, subscribe. Go on Andrew4ky.com, donate. Thank you guys so much. Have a great rest of your day.